There are moments in life when we're asked to step up and do the near impossible.
Hernandez makes the catch. Back to second. Game 7 tomorrow night.
Moments where one small move can make the biggest impact. Game 7 of the World Series had 3 such magical moments. One involved a role player who hadn't had a hit in weeks. One involved an outfielder who was benched. And one featured a superstar pitcher who wasn't even supposed to throw a pitch that day. And yet, somehow, those 3 guys combined for the biggest home run, the greatest catch, and the rarest pitch of the entire postseason.
Trill to left field and deep.
In this video, I'm going to share my insight into how Miguel Rojas, Andy Pages, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto did something nearly impossible. They stepped outside their numbers and met the moment. They channeled championship energy and turned the improbable into the inevitable. But first, if you're new here, welcome. I'm Trill. I'm a conscious creator and a high-vibe music artist. I'm also a former professional sports handicapper, one of the best in the world. That means I used to predict the outcomes of sporting events, release my predictions to my clients, and most of the time, beat the odds makers, which made my clients money. So if you're interested in that perspective, hit the like and subscribe, and let's dive in. Quick recap of the World Series. The Blue Jays dominated games 1, 4, and 5 by putting the ball in play. Their goal was to prove that old-school contact-first baseball can still win titles, and they came within 2 outs of doing it.
Chopper to first. Gun to second one. Back to first. 2.
The Dodgers took care of business in Game 2 behind Yamamoto, and won Game 3 in the 18th inning thanks to Freeman's home run. They took Game 6, again in large part due to Yamamoto's electric performance, which brought the series to Game 7. The Dodgers' team batting average is the worst ever for a World Series winner in the DH era. But when they did connect, it was nuclear. 5 of the 9 biggest hits by champion win probability are Dodger home runs in the late innings of Game 3 and 7. So yeah, you can make a home runs and luck argument. But when I was a professional sports handicapper, I spent a ton of time watching games through 2 lenses: the math and the energy, the probabilities and the feel. And when I rewatched Game 7, what jumps out to me is how 3 guys who statistically had no business being the heroes suddenly became the exact frequency the moment required. So let's start with the guy who was basically invisible on offense for weeks. Miguel Rojas has been in the league a long time. He's the steady veteran, the glue guy, the dude everyone inside the clubhouse respects. But he's not supposed to be the Game 7, bottom of the 9th, swing that saves the season guy. Going into this game, Rojas had started only his 2nd game since the NLDS. He had just 1 extra base hit in his previous 20 postseason games. He hadn't homered since mid-September. But here we are, top of the 9th, Dodgers down 4-3, 2 outs away from the Jays cracking open champagne. Jeff Hoffman, who has been a monster with his 4-seamer fastball for weeks, is on the mound. Since mid-September, hitters are 1 for 21 against that heater. 1 hit. That's it. And Rojas is not a guy who punishes 96-mile-per-hour 4-seamers. He literally hadn't hit a home run off a fastball that hard in 6 years. Think about that. Hoffman gets ahead, then Rojas fouls off a sinker and a 4-seamer away. So now we're 2-2. Hoffman spikes a bad slider, and suddenly it's 3-2. Full count. Here's where the whole universe tilts. Hoffman can't walk Rojas. If he does, Ohtani comes up as a potential go-ahead run. So Hoffman's telling himself, I need a strike right now. Logically, the pitch here is the fastball. It's been dominant for weeks, and Rojas doesn't handle velocity. But this is 2025 baseball. Nobody trusts their fastball anymore. We're fully in the era of spin. Hoffman and his catcher go with the slider again, his best pitch by run value. Except now, it has to be in the strike zone. And when you try to baby a breaking ball into the zone, you lose spin, you lose break, you lose everything that makes it nasty. That's exactly what happens. The slider comes in with 300 fewer RPMs, less vertical drop, less horizontal break. In normal people language, it just kind of hangs there. Exactly where Rojas does damage. And this is where we talk about meeting the moment. Because yes, this is a bad decision by Hoffman. It's the wrong pitch in the wrong count to the wrong hitter. But the pitch still has to be hit. And Rojas could easily have been too amped, too desperate to be present enough to recognize the gift falling into his lap. Instead, after weeks of not doing much at the plate, he just stays there, calm enough to see the hanger, clear enough to trust his swing. And he launches the only pitch in that entire sequence that he was realistically going to hit for a home run.
And a ball hit to deep left field, and it's gone!
The most unlikely source has changed Game 7.
Tie game, 4-4. The Rogers Center goes from "we're about to erupt" to "wait, what just happened?" But Rojas isn't done. In the bottom of the ninth, the Jays have the bases loaded and only one out. Season on the line again for the Dodgers. Dalton Varsho hits a hard grounder to the right side. Rojas is playing in. He gets to it, but his feet kind of betray him. There's a little stagger as he sets to throw, but he recovers and fires home to Will Smith to barely, and I mean barely, get Falefa at the plate. Falefa had been coached into taking a slightly shorter lead at third, overcorrecting to avoid a line drive double play, and it ends up being the difference between glory and heartbreak for the Blue Jays. On the other side, there's Rojas, who's playing through a rib issue, yet he had enough in the tank to make the throw that kept the Dodgers season going. So in one inning, this guy hits a game-tying home run off a pitch he had no statistical business hitting and makes a game-saving play. That's not probability, that's presence. It's what it looks like when a veteran who's been grinding in the shadows for years is suddenly fully available to the one moment the baseball gods decide to hand him. Now let's talk about the guy who made what might be the greatest defensive play in World Series history. Andy Pajas came into Game 7 ice cold. He was in a 4-for-50 spiral and had been benched from the starting lineup. By the ninth inning, he's in a hoodie at the far end of the dugout, sitting for 3.5 hours. Then the whole script flips again. Bottom of the ninth, bases loaded. Dave Roberts decides he needs Pajas' arm in center field in case of a sacrifice fly. Bench coach Danny Lehman runs down the dugout to grab him and tell him he's in. Pajas rips off the hoodie, scrambles for his glove, and jogs out to center field. Next batter, Ernie Clement, who's having the postseason of his life and has just set the single hits record with his 30th hit. He gets a nasty curveball from Yamamoto down by his shoes, yet still manages to drive it 366 feet towards the gap in left center. That ball would have been a home run in several parks. Kike Hernandez, playing shallow and left, beelines toward the ball. It's an almost impossible play for him. Out of nowhere, Andy Pajas appears in the frame like a Marvel character. According to StatCast, Pajas covers 121 to 123 feet with a sprint speed of 29.2 feet per second. That's a huge jump from his usual 28.1 feet per second, which is more league average speed. But in that moment, he's suddenly moving in the 93rd percentile. Think about that. He literally becomes faster than his normal self because of the moment. He gets there just in time, leaps over Hernandez, and the ball drops into his glove in a balletic collision of limbs and leather. If that ball hits the turf, the series is over, and Ernie Clement is World Series MVP. Instead, Pajas, who was too cold to start, who has been sitting in a hoodie for hours, freezing his butt off, makes the catch that forces extra innings and keeps the door open for Will Smith's walk-off 2 innings later. From an energy standpoint, this is one of my favorite parts of the whole series. Because what is readiness really? It's not, I feel amazing, I'm in a great stretch here. It's, even when I feel like the weak link, I'm still willing to answer the bell the exact second my name is called. Pajas didn't control when he got in. He controlled whether he was present enough to give everything on a ball that had maybe a 40% chance of being caught. Sometimes meeting the moment looks like that. You're benched, you're slumping, and all of a sudden, you're running faster than you ever have in your life. And then there's Yoshinobu Yamamoto. If you followed his year, his workload was insane. He threw the first pitch of the Dodgers season in Tokyo and threw the last pitch of their season in Toronto. In the World Series alone, he logged 17 2/3 innings, gave up just 2 runs, and won World Series MVP. Game 6, he throws 96 pitches over 6 innings. Even Dave Roberts is telling the media he's the one guy who's unavailable for Game 7. Everyone assumes his season is done. So what is he doing back on the mound in the 9th, on 0 days rest? This is where Osamu Yada comes in, Yamamoto's longtime personal trainer. Yada suggests that Yamamoto warm up in the bullpen during Game 7, not to pitch, but to give the Dodgers a psychological edge, to make the Jays think he might appear. As Yamamoto tells it later, laughing, "That's how I got tricked." He goes down to the pen to pretend, and then the game does what the game keeps doing. It creates a moment where you either back down or you step up. Yamamoto feels surprisingly good while he's throwing in the bullpen. The next thing he knows, he's jogging towards the mound. Game 7, season on the line, runners on, Jays crowd frothing. On back-to-back days, for the first time in his professional career, he ends up giving the Dodgers 2 2/3 scoreless innings and getting the final 8 outs of the World Series. Now let's zoom in on the very last pitch. Bottom of the 11th. Dodgers up 5-4. Guerrero Jr. has doubled. Sack bunt moves him to third. Yamamoto walks Addison Barger on purpose to set up the double play. That brings up Alejandro Kirk. Statistically, Kirk is one of the slowest runners in baseball and almost twice as likely as the average hitter to ground into a double play. Yamamoto, meanwhile, induces ground balls over 53% of the time versus a league average of 44%. So the math says if he can get Kirk to hit something on the ground, his odds are great. Yamamoto throws a cutter for a foul ball, a curveball for a swinging strike. Now it's 0-2, and he reaches for a pitch he almost never uses, the splitter away to a right-handed hitter. According to Tom Verducci, he threw 360 splitters to right-handers this year. Only 4 of them landed in that middle away box of the strike zone. One of those 4 is the pitch he threw to Kirk in his last at-bat. The pitch dives just enough. Kirk takes that weird half swing, snaps his bat, and chops the ball to the ground. Routine double play for Mookie Betts. World Series over. From a pure pitching nerd perspective, it's amazing. From an energetic perspective, it's transformational. Yamamoto wasn't supposed to pitch at all. He ends up throwing on 0 rest, and the entire season comes down to a pitch he essentially never throws in that exact spot to that type of hitter. That's what I mean when I say there's the scouting report, and then there's the part of you that just knows. Sometimes you meet the moment not by doing the thing you always do, but by trusting that you can step outside your own pattern and still execute. Before we zoom out, we've got to honor the hero from Game 3, pitcher Will Klein. Game 3 is an 18-inning fever dream, second longest World Series game ever. 19 pitchers, 6+ hours. Will Klein is an unheralded reliever who almost wasn't on the World Series roster. Injuries and a late personal issue for Alex Vesia opened up a spot. His previous postseason work, mop-up duty and a blowout loss in Game 1. Then Game 3 refuses to end, and suddenly Will Klein is the last man in the bullpen. He ends up throwing 4 scoreless innings, a career-high 72 pitches, which is more than double anything he'd thrown in the majors before, holding the Blue Jays down long enough for Freddie Freeman to hit the walk-off. After the game, he talks about having to dig deep because the Dodgers didn't have any options left. Now, why do I bring this up in a video that's about Game 7? Because Will Klein's performance is like the portal that makes the rest of this story possible. If he cracks in Game 3, if the Dodgers lose that marathon, maybe we never get a Game 6. Maybe we never get a Game 7. Sometimes the person who changes your destiny is the one who quietly keeps the door open long enough for your future self to walk through. So what do we do with all this? From a pure analytics standpoint, you can explain every moment we've talked about. Hoffman made a bad pitch decision. Clement's ball had a certain launch angle that put it in the tough but catchable bucket. Yamamoto's splitter usage chart tells you that he can throw that pitch. He just rarely chooses to. All true, but as someone who used to bet on games for a living, here's what I know. The numbers are the map, not the territory. They tell you what usually happens. They don't tell you how any one human being will respond when they're standing in the exact center of a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Rojas was not supposed to hit that ball out. Pages was not supposed to be faster than he's ever been after 3.5 hours on the bench. Yamamoto was not supposed to be on the mound at all, much less throw a unicorn splitter. And yet, all three did something beyond the probable, and they did it in the exact window where it mattered most. If you're only looking at stats, you call that luck. If you're looking at the inner game, you start to see something else. Preparation, belief, trust, and a willingness to answer when the universe says, "Hey you're up." So let's pull this out of Toronto and into your life. Where are you, Miguel Rojas, right now? Maybe you feel like you haven't had a hit in weeks. You're doing the right things, but nothing's showing up on the scoreboard. The temptation is to check out, to assume that your role is just to be a background character. But what if your job isn't to manufacture a moment? What if your job is simply to stay present enough that if and when a hanging slider shows up, you recognize it and swing? Where are you, Andy Pages? Maybe you feel benched, overlooked. You're in a hoodie at the far end of the dugout watching everyone else get their highlight reels. The question is, if your name gets called, if life throws a ball 366 feet over your head, have you left yourself enough bandwidth, enough belief to run harder than you ever have? Where are you, Yamamoto? Maybe you're convinced you're done. You've already thrown 96 pitches and won your 2 starts. You're telling yourself your season is over. And then some version of Master Yada shows up in your life and tricks you into seeing if there's just a little bit more left in the tank. Maybe there's a pitch in you that you almost never throw, a part of yourself you rarely trust in high leverage spots. And maybe the version of you on the other side of this chapter is the one who finally says, "Okay, let's see what happens if I go there." And finally, where is your Will Klein moment? The thing that doesn't look glamorous on paper, but quietly keeps the door open long enough for your own Game 7 magic to exist. That late night editing session, that extra rep in therapy or at the gym, that conversation you didn't want to have but had it anyway. In baseball, those moments end up as lines in a game log. In life, they show up as suddenly everything changed. For me, that's what made this World Series so special. Yes, it was incredible baseball. Yes, it was chaos and drama and late night stress until the final out. But underneath all that, it was also a masterclass in humans stepping beyond their probabilities and into greater possibility. Rojas, Pages, Yamamoto, the night 3 Dodgers did the impossible and reminded us that the story isn't over just because the stats say so. If you enjoy high vibe content, please like and subscribe. And if you want more breakdowns just like this, where we talk about the game behind the game, the invisible momentum, the consciousness side of sports, entertainment, and life, let me know in the comments. Also, tell me which of the 3 or 4 Dodgers you relate to the most. Which moment hit you the hardest? Thank you so much again for watching. Until next time, namaste.